Clint Eastwood had a reservation when a wealthy couple demanded the manager give them his table. "We're regulars. He's just some old man." When the manager nervously approached Clint, what happened next left the entire restaurant silent and got the manager fired. It was a Saturday evening in April 2019, and Clint Eastwood had made a 7 p.m. reservation at Bella Notte, an upscale Italian restaurant in West Hollywood. He was meeting his son Kyle for dinner, a rare opportunity to catch up since Kyle had been traveling for work. Clint had called ahead that morning, made the reservation under his name, and confirmed the time. Bella Notte was the kind of restaurant where reservations were essential, especially on weekends. It was elegant without being pretentious, known for authentic Italian cuisine and a quiet atmosphere that attracted people who wanted good food and conversation, not to be seen. Clint arrived at 6:55, dressed in his usual style, clean but casual. A button-down shirt, slacks, no tie. At 89 years old, he'd long ago stopped dressing to impress anyone. The hostess, a young woman named Sophia, greeted him warmly. "Mr. Eastwood, your table is ready. Your son called to say he's running about 15 minutes late from the airport." "No problem. I'll wait at the table." Sophia led him to a corner booth, one of the best tables in the restaurant, with a view of the garden and enough privacy for conversation. Clint settled in, ordered a glass of wine, and relaxed. 10 minutes later, at 7:05, a couple walked into Bella Notte without a reservation. Richard and Amanda Hastings were in their early 50s, expensively dressed, and carried themselves with the entitled confidence of people used to getting what they wanted. Richard was a real estate developer who'd made a fortune during the previous decade. Amanda was an interior designer whose clients included several celebrities. They considered themselves sophisticated, connected, and above the ordinary rules that applied to regular people. "We need a table for two," Richard told Sophia at the hostess stand. Sophia checked her reservation book. "I'm so sorry, sir. We're completely booked for the evening. We do have availability tomorrow." "We don't want tomorrow," Amanda cut her off. "We eat here every week. We spend thousands of dollars at this restaurant. You can find us a table." Sophia, 23 years old and in her first year at Bella Notte, felt the pressure. "Let me check with the manager." She found Marcus Webb, the restaurant's floor manager. Marcus was 31, ambitious, and had been with Bella Notte for 3 years. He wanted to move up to general manager, and part of that meant keeping high-spending customers happy. "The Hastings are here without a reservation," Sophia said. "They're insisting on a table." Marcus knew the Hastings. They did eat there regularly, maybe twice a month, and they did spend money. But more importantly, they were connected. Amanda had referred several celebrity clients to the restaurant. Richard knew the restaurant critic for the Los Angeles Times. They were the kind of customers who could help or hurt the restaurant's reputation. "We're completely booked," Marcus said, but he was already scanning the dining room, looking for options. His eyes landed on the corner booth where Clint was sitting alone, sipping wine, waiting for his son. "That table," Richard said, following Marcus's gaze. "That old man is by himself. He doesn't need a booth. Move him to the bar or a small table." Marcus hesitated. He knew that table had a reservation, but he didn't know whose reservation it was. Sophia had seated someone, but in the busy flow of Saturday evening service, Marcus hadn't checked the name. "Sir, that table has a reservation." "We're regulars," Amanda said, her voice getting louder. "We spend significant money here. That man is just some old guy sitting alone. We're a couple. We need that booth. Make it happen." Marcus made a decision he would regret for the rest of his career. He decided that keeping the Hastings happy was more important than honoring whatever reservation that elderly man had. "Let me handle it," Marcus said to Sophia, who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. Marcus walked across the dining room to Clint's table. Clint was reading something on his phone, peaceful, unbothered. Marcus noticed he was dressed casually, not the typical West Hollywood dinner attire, and assumed this was probably someone's grandfather, maybe a local who didn't understand that Bella Notte had become fashionable. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said, putting on his professional smile. "I'm Marcus, the floor manager. I apologize, but we have a situation. We have regular customers who need this table, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to move to a different table. We have a nice two-top available near the kitchen, or you're welcome to sit at the bar." Clint looked up from his phone. He didn't look angry, just mildly surprised. "I have a reservation for this table. 7 p.m., party of 2. "Yes, I understand, sir, but these are preferred customers who spend considerable money here. I'm sure you understand. The bar has a full menu, and I have a reservation," Clint repeated, his tone unchanged. "I made it this morning, for 7 p.m. This table." Marcus felt the pressure of the Hastings watching from across the room. He made his second mistake of the evening. "Sir, I'm trying to be accommodating here. These guests are regulars. They're important to our business. You're dining alone. Well, you said party of 2, but I only see one person, so you don't really need a booth. I'm asking you, as a courtesy, to move to a more appropriate table." Clint set down his phone. He looked at Marcus with that steady gaze that had intimidated people in films for 60 years and intimidated people in real life for even longer. More appropriate for whom? Marcus realized he'd stepped into something, but he didn't know how to back out without looking weak in front of the Hastings. "Sir, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to accommodate all of our guests by asking me to give up my reserved table to people who didn't bother to make a reservation." The conversation was happening in a normal speaking voice, but in a restaurant with good acoustics and attentive diners, people were starting to notice. The tables nearest to Clint's booth had gone quiet. People were watching. At that moment, Giovanni Russo, the owner of Bella Notte, walked out of the kitchen. Giovanni was 63, had opened Bella Notte 15 years earlier, and ran it with pride. He prided himself on treating every customer well, whether they were celebrities or regular people. Giovanni immediately sensed the tension. He saw Marcus standing at a table, saw the guest sitting calmly but with a posture that suggested he was not happy, and saw Richard and Amanda Hastings watching from near the hostess stand with expectant expressions. As Giovanni got closer, he recognized the man Marcus was talking to. His face went pale. "Marcus," Giovanni said sharply, "step away from that table, now." Marcus turned, confused. "Mr. Russo, I'm just trying to—" "Step away," Giovanni repeated, his voice low but firm. Marcus backed away from the table, uncertain what was happening. Giovanni approached Clint, and his demeanor changed completely. He looked mortified. "Mr. Eastwood, I apologize. I don't know what's happening here, but whatever it is, I'm deeply sorry." The restaurant wasn't silent yet, but it was getting there. The name Eastwood had carried across the room. People at nearby tables were turning to look. Someone whispered, "Is that Clint Eastwood?" Clint nodded to Giovanni. "Your manager was asking me to give up my reserved table to accommodate guests who don't have a reservation." Giovanni's face went from pale to red. He turned to Marcus. "You asked Mr. Eastwood to move?" Marcus realized his mistake now, but it was too late. "I didn't know who. They're regular customers, and they—" "Get away from this table," Giovanni said, his voice shaking with anger. "Go to my office, now." Marcus walked away, his face burning. Sophia, the hostess, looked like she wanted to disappear. The Hastings, realizing something had gone very wrong, were starting to understand who they'd tried to displace. Giovanni turned back to Clint. "Mr. Eastwood, I'm so sorry. Your table is yours, of course. Your reservation was made, confirmed, and honored. This should never have happened." The restaurant was now completely silent. Every diner was watching. This wasn't eavesdropping anymore. This was witnessing something significant. Clint spoke calmly, but his voice carried in the silence. "Giovanni, your manager told me that other guests were more important to your business than I am. He called them preferred customers. He suggested the bar would be more appropriate for me." Giovanni looked like he might cry. "That is not how we run this restaurant. That is not what we believe. Every guest is valued here." "Then why did your manager say otherwise?" Giovanni didn't have a good answer. He turned to face the dining room. Richard and Amanda Hastings were still standing near the hostess stand, and they were the only ones who hadn't figured out they should leave. "Which guests were more important than Mr. Eastwood?" Giovanni asked, loudly enough for everyone to hear. Someone at a nearby table said quietly, "The couple by the entrance." All eyes turned to the Hastings. Amanda looked at Richard. Richard looked at the floor. Giovanni walked across the dining room to them. The entire restaurant watched. "You demanded this table?" Giovanni asked. Richard cleared his throat. "We eat here regularly. We didn't think it would be a problem to. You told my manager to move Mr. Eastwood because you're regulars? Amanda tried to save it. We didn't know who he was. If you'd known, you would have left him alone, Giovanni finished. But because you thought he was just some old man, you felt entitled to his table. And my manager agreed with you. The silence in the restaurant was profound. 80 people were watching this play out. No one was eating. No one was talking. Everyone was frozen. Giovanni turned to address the entire restaurant. Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you all an apology. Tonight, you witnessed something that goes against every value this restaurant stands for. A guest with a confirmed reservation was asked to move because someone who didn't have a reservation thought they were more important. That guest was Clint Eastwood, but that's not why what happened was wrong. It was wrong because we treat every guest with respect, regardless of who they are. He looked at the Hastings. You need to leave. You're not welcome here tonight, and you won't be welcome here in the future. Richard started to protest. Now wait a minute. Leave, now. They left. The door closed behind them, and for a moment, the silence continued. Then, someone started clapping. Then, someone else. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was applauding, not for the drama, but for the principle, for Giovanni standing up for what was right. Giovanni returned to Clint's table. Mr. Eastwood, your meal tonight is on the house. It's the least I can do. Clint shook his head. I'll pay for my meal, Giovanni, but thank you for handling that the way you did. Your manager made a mistake, Clint said. The question is whether he learns from it. Kyle Eastwood arrived 20 minutes later. By then, the restaurant had returned to normal volume, though everyone in the room was still buzzing about what they had witnessed. Clint and Kyle had a quiet dinner, talked about Kyle's music projects and Clint's latest film work, and enjoyed their meal. In Giovanni's office, Marcus Webb sat in shame, waiting to learn his fate. Giovanni came in after the Eastwoods had left. He sat down heavily in his chair. You asked Clint Eastwood to move. I didn't recognize him, and even if I had, the Hastings are good customers. We're good customers, Giovanni corrected. They're not welcome back, and neither are you. Mr. Russo, I was trying to make good business sense. Good business sense? Giovanni's voice rose. You told a guest with a reservation that other people were more important. You prioritized people without a reservation over someone who'd planned ahead. You judged a man by his appearance and decided he wasn't valuable. That's not business sense. That's discrimination. I didn't mean to discriminate. Intention doesn't matter when the impact is clear. You asked an 89-year-old man to give up his table and move to the bar because you thought a flashy couple was more important. What you did tonight is exactly what I've spent 15 years making sure this restaurant doesn't do. Marcus was fired that night. Sophia, the hostess, kept her job because Giovanni recognized she'd been uncomfortable with the situation and had tried to push back. Word of what happened spread through West Hollywood within hours. By Sunday morning, there were already posts on social media from people who'd been there. The story got picked up by local news. Within a week, it was being discussed on restaurant industry forums as an example of what not to do. Bella Nata got more reservation requests than ever. People wanted to eat at the restaurant where the owner had stood up for principles over profit. Giovanni instituted new training for all staff. Every guest gets treated with equal respect, regardless of appearance, fame, or spending history. The story became part of the restaurant's culture. Marcus Webb eventually found work at another restaurant, but the story followed him. He tells it differently now, not as the time I asked Clint Eastwood to move, but as the time I learned that how someone looks or dresses tells you nothing about their value, and treating people differently based on those judgments is the fastest way to lose your integrity and your job. The Hastings tried to return to Bella Nota a year later. Giovanni saw them at the door and personally turned them away. We haven't forgotten, he said simply. Clint still eats at Bella Nota occasionally. Giovanni always makes sure his reservation is honored, though Clint doesn't need the special treatment. He just wants a good meal in a quiet place with people who understand that respect isn't reserved for those who look or spend a certain way. If this story of entitled customers meeting swift justice, of one manager's mistake becoming an entire restaurant's teaching moment, and of an owner who chose principles over profit moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with anyone in hospitality, anyone who's been judged by appearance, or anyone who needs to be reminded that treating people with respect isn't negotiable. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated poorly because of how they looked and seen justice served? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about standing up for what's right.